If you haven't noticed lately, in professional bass fishing, there have been several tournaments dominated by a certain technique. This small, inexpensive jighead minnow has won hundreds of thousands of dollars, including a Bassmaster Classic. In this video, we bring on Joey Nanina, a guy who has nicknamed this technique the Ned Miki. Joey recently won a Bassmaster Open event with this technique, and he's going to break down everything that you need to know about the Ned Miki. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. Today, I really want to talk to Joey about a certain technique that he's actually kind of come up with his own name. We've seen it a lot in fishing here recently, but Joey, you have named this the Ned Miki, and I really just want you to go in depth with this bait. Tell us your system, how you fish it, the lures you use, everything. So, Joey, welcome to the show. Tell us about the Ned Miki.
Yeah, guys, I'm glad to be on here, and it's always a great opportunity anytime I get to hop on with some other fishermen and share some things. And I did learn a long time ago that there's more growth to be had in this industry sharing things than there is hiding secrets and trying to win tournaments with them, because the tournament wins are going to happen with them if you're truly good with them. And you're not going to win an extra tournament by hiding something in a lot of cases. I mean, there are the times where you don't want to let something out too soon, but this has been a slow progression, and I've always felt like I was going to win on the Ned Miki system. I really did, and I've been close before. I almost won the Lake Norman event a couple years ago. I finished second in that one. And so the weird thing is, of course, I won at Eufaula, Oklahoma, which I was not expecting for it to win at Eufaula, Oklahoma. That's one of the weirdest places you would ever imagine. It's like, wait, what? Yeah. This place is supposed to be dirty and shallow water fishing. And I realized pretty quickly that there was a clear portion of that lake. And then I found fish on brush and fish in schools. And anytime I can find fish like that and I can tease them with the Ned Miki, that's what I'm going to do. And I love catching them that way, and it just kind of fell into my lap. But the whole system in general is just two parts. You got the finesse-sized jig head right there. That's the 3/16 with the 1/0 hook, and that's the one I throw more often than not. And then my favorite bait on it, even though they make the 4-inch scented jerk shads and also the 5-inch scented jerk shads, I still love the Z-Man Streaks 375. So that's the one right there that I wanted on. And that's the shiner color, and that's what I wanted on also. So that's the bait setup right there. And it is just a nasty little natural looking deal when you put it all together. There it is, all put together right there. It just absolutely looks perfect, and it imitates what bass eat. And you guys know what bass eat 90% of the time. They eat other fish. So they like eating crawdads and they love eating other stuff, but they eat fish. That's what they eat. So that's what you're looking like when you're throwing that bait.
Yeah, so it is a really cool technique because it's so easy. You know, like guys have been catching walleye their whole life and stuff on little jig head minnow type baits, but it's really kind of just started to hit the bass fishing industry. But it's not necessarily always the bait, it's also kind of the action and everything that you put into it. So I'd really love to just kind of hear your take on that, because that is such an integral part of it, is how you work this bait and exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you can throw it and fish it and hop it around and fish it randomly, and you can catch some fish on it, but it all comes together when you put forward-facing sonar with it. And it all comes together when you're able to see the fish track the bait, and you're able to read their behavior and their movements, and you're able to trick them based on what they want. And so it's really cool, or based on what they don't want. You eliminate certain ways to retrieve it in certain situations based on how the fish are behaving. So I watch the fish, I watch the bait. I'm able to call the fish up and out of places. And there's a couple different ways to work it. You know, it started out before forward-facing sonar. I killed them on the Ned Miki. And I started calling it the Ned Miki because I used to just throw the Z-Man Ned rig jig head, the Ned locks and the 1/6 ounce. And I would put the Streaks 375 on the back of it, and I would throw it in schools out deep. I would throw it, in schools in the wintertime and schools in the summer. I would fish it all the time. I even caught snook on it. One of the first times I ever caught fish on it was skipping a really light one up under docks, catching snook in Florida when we were filming Sweetwater. So it kind of fell into play in that way. I was sitting on a pressured school of bass, and my guide client was catching some fish on a crappie jig, catching some big bass. And I'm like, man, that thing I was catching snook on this summer would kill him. And that started happening. And I'm like, wait, this works not just in the wintertime like everyone thinks it does. This works in the summertime too, and in the fall. And it became a year-round universal bait. But the way you work it is so important. And what I did to win the tournament here, I call it tickle winding. In a lot of cases, that's how I caught half the fish. I call it the tickle wind. And when I'm out there on the water in a tournament, I say it with a Japanese accent to myself when I'm talking to myself like we all do. So, oh, ticker wind. So, and I love the Japanese guys. The
Yeah.
ticker wind. You got to tickle wind it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm good friends with Taku Ito and stuff. And I just love those guys. And so they're so funny and I love their accents.
Yep.
And so that's what I do is the tickle wind. And, that catches a lot of fish. And what you're doing is you're just keeping the bait at a specific level. I'm making, pretty long casts with it, anywhere from 30 to 80 feet. And I'm letting the bait sink. And I want it to come up over the brush or over the wood or over the fish's head and coast right up above them. And I'm winding steady, but as I'm doing it, I'm shivering. It's like if you drank too much caffeine, you're just shivering the whole entire time as you're coming in. You're keeping the bait level, and you don't want it to be lowering as you're bringing it back to the boat. You want it to be just staying level or slightly rising and quivering as it's coming back to the boat. And that's the way that you can really call those fish up. Like when that thing's just coasting by them slowly and hovering and then just rising slightly and teasing, it makes them fly out. Now, when they fly out of cover or whatever after it, normally you want to accelerate a little bit. It's just like a cat and mouse game. Muskie fishing is the same way. If a muskie follows a bait on a figure eight and you slow down or stop the figure eight, the muskie doesn't eat. But if you keep it going fast and you keep it turning and you keep them coming, they'll eat it. And that's the same thing with the Ned Miki. I actually almost caught a big muskie on the Ned Miki doing that. But it's a cool technique and it's a great way to fish it. So the tickle wind is what I've been doing the most lately. But there's so many ways. I also caught fish in that Eufaula, Oklahoma tournament in a deep school that was mixed with white bass. And so I'm throwing it out there and letting it sink into the white bass. And there was thousands of white bass there. And I was very fortunate. It was just a blessing in practice. I had a bite from a largemouth, my first cast in that white bass school that was on that deep point. And that was the only bite I had there in practice. It was with 30 minutes left before I had to be out the water. I catch a 3-pounder and I'm like, okay, this could be something. And, pull up there in the tournament late in the day and catch 2 4-pounders. And then the second day I caught a 4 and a 6 and a 3. And it's just, it turned out to be an amazing place. But that I was doing different. I was letting it sink through the school of white bass, hit the bottom, and I was more tight lining it where you pick it up and let it pendulum through them and just let it swing and get tapped by the white bass and then fall underneath them and then I'd catch them. So it's versatile. It really is. You can fish it in a lot of different ways.
Are you fishing the Ned Miki in any aggressive ways, or is it predominantly you're either tickle winding, you're tight lining, or are there any times where you're just, jerking it out of brush, snapping it, working it more like a jerkbait?
Not as much like a jerkbait. I do burn it a lot though. Especially on herring lakes, I'll burn it. So I'll throw it out and I'll let it sink to them. As soon as it gets within sight of a wolf pack or over a tree or something or a cane pile, I'll burn it as fast as I can. And that's one thing that's unique about the Ned Miki and the Z-Man version of it that makes it different than any other version of it. I can take this bait, and if you rig it properly, I can burn it full speed back to the boat, and it'll swim like a scrounger and it won't roll. And so that's something that most people still don't know. I can make that bait. See how I have it loosely rigged on there? I don't have it like all the way up on the jig head far. I've got it where it's hanging a little bit, and that makes it so it's got all this free movement. And then this jig head, this finesse-sized jig head, has got the little concave chin, the little V under the chin. And that right there makes this thing literally swim like a scrounger. And so Lake Hartwell in the Classic that I fished there, and also in the Summer Open that I did good in there, I was throwing it out there, letting the fish see it, and then burning it as fast as I could in that clear water, and they'd come up and hit it. So that's the most aggressive way I fish it, is burning it. And I will switch to bigger baits in that situation a lot of the time. I'll go with the scented jerk shads, the 4-inch, and then also the 5-inch. And if I go to the 5-inch, I upgrade the hook size to the 3-aught instead of the 1-aught from Z-Man. So it's, the system can get bigger or smaller, and you can catch them doing a lot of different retrieves with it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You don't hear a lot about kind of lure design, product design when it comes to a jig head. Everyone just, it's a jig head. Let's just make it look cool. But it sounds like Z-Man went in and said, okay, we're going to put this concave belly on it.
Yep.
We're going to balance and weight it perfectly so that in the situation, if you do need to burn it, it's not going to roll on its side. And it's super cool. You said, Joey, is rigging this loose. That way the bait has more freedom to go side to side.
Yep.
but also maintain its balance and stability. So that's cool. You're looking at, $200, $300, $400 swim baits that have all of this design put into them to make them perfect. And then you're looking at, a simple terminal tackle, a jig head, and how this is much more superior than what your Farmer John's pouring in his basement. Super cool.
That's why I love it so much, man. It's crazy. It really is cool. It's something that I got excited about when I first saw it, or when I first saw the finesse eyes. I had already been doing it, like I said, on the Ned head, but it wouldn't swim like that. And so when they came out with the finesse eyes, I got to see the first prototypes, and I was like, this is going to be something special. And it turned out that it is very special. And now people need to stop winning tournaments on this, on the similar system or the similar baits. We need to tone it down for a minute, give the fish a break.
I think
because he catches too many.
Yeah, I think something that I love about talking to guys who are like really like we do it the same with certain baits. Like I know that certain baits really, really well, and it's those little things like you just said, with the groove being on the bottom, like Joey was talking about. I love talking to guys who have done this. They have just picked it apart. They know the exact equipment to use with this rig. They know exactly how that bait's going to work when it's coming really, really slow, when it's going really, really fast. I think that is something that is really overlooked because it is so easy. Like you said, you think it's a jig head. We can just pick up any ball head jig. It's going to do the same. No. It's not, and it's those little intricacies, those little things that really make a big difference. And along those lines, Joey, I'd love to know kind of your rod and reel setup, because I know that's a huge part as well. Again, it's something that we all might think, just pick up any spinning rod, but I'm sure you kind of have a specific rod and reel line, everything. So what do you use for this?
Yeah, the rod and reel and line is super important with it. And just to go back really quick on what you said, I used to look at pro anglers that were like the best in the business, and they were so dialed and had so many little intricacies of little, like watching KVD crank and throw a square bill. There was a whole system to what he was doing, and there was a reason he was so good at it. Or just anybody. I mean, they're just really dialed on things, and they had these little tricks and these things they would do. And I'm just out there trying to make it in the opens as a 19, 20, 22, 23-year-old. And I'm like, I don't have any special anything. Like I'm just trying to have a few of the right baits on, and I'm just going fishing. And then it happens as you get more experience, you start to dial things in, and then you have the specific tackle. Exactly what the bait does. That if you rig that bait 1/8 of an inch wrong, it doesn't do what it was supposed to do, and it doesn't catch them. And so you get better. You really do. You get more dialed, and you get better. And like you said, part of being better and being dialed is having the right equipment. So I got the rod that I throw right here. This is a TFO, or Temple Fork Outfitters TFO. They started out in the fly industry, and they're really big in the fly industry, but they've been making bass rods for over 10 years. And this is an amazing rod. This is the Resolve rod, and it's a 7.3 medium light plus. And I really think the 7.3 medium light plus is like the perfect length and the perfect balance and the perfect power. Everything's just right on it, and it's super, super comfortable and lightweight. But it's got the backbone, but still having a soft tip, and I just have a lot of control over the fish with it when they bite it. I can make a long cast. I can do everything you'd want in one rod. It's not, it really is perfect. It just matches what you want to do with this. And you can feel it when you put it in your hand that it's the right rod for the deal. Now the line is probably one of the most important things. I throw 10-pound braid. This right here is Vicious No Fade braid. And that's 10-pound test, and it's super, so it's thin, and I can make long casts with it. And it's also incredibly smooth. It just is, and there's no memory. My dad still throws mono on his spinning reels, and he gets mad when I call him out on podcasts. But Joel just will not put a braid on his spinning reels, and I just want him to so bad.
Come on,
because
Joel.
it changes the game when you finally make the switch to braid on a spinning reel. You're like, okay, this is what I've been missing out on once you get comfortable with it. And then to that 10-pound braid, I connect a 14-pound leader. Oh. So having a 14-pound leader, most people hear that and they're like, really, 14-pound leader? And this right here is the Vicious Tora fluorocarbon. So that's a 14-pound leader, but it's the diameter of normal 11-pound test fluorocarbon. So it's less than a 12-pound test size with the 14-pound breaking strength, and it's really, really high quality. It's not cheap, but it's great to use for leader line. And I actually throw it all my flipping stuff. I flip with their Tora, their heavier pound tests, but it's just amazing line. And that makes it so I can be aggressive on those fish. And I've made posts before where I'm boat flipping 3-pounders in on a spinning reel with a Ned Miki, and it's because I'm using 14-pound test leader. I can manhandle the fish, and I've caught 2 6.5+ pounders on a Ned Miki this year, and I get comfortable because I can control those fish. I'm not going to let the fish whoop me. I'm going to keep him moving, and I can move his head and manipulate him and move him on the jumps and keep him going in the right direction, and I can power him to the boat. And I'm fine with playing a fish, but I like to keep their momentum moving, and I like to be a little bit rough on them and show them who's boss and put them in the boat, you know?
That's right.
That's funny. Show him who's
Yeah,
boss.
that's right.
That is that's super interesting.
Who does number 2 work for?
Yeah, that's right. You are mine. Man, I noticed that when I was watching some of your video from Eufaula, and I noticed one, when you would set, there was some drag obviously that came out, but it wasn't like substantial, so I knew like you were probably using a little bit heavier line, and then you were showing them. I mean, you were still, making sure you got them in, but you weren't completely babying them. It's not a 3-minute fight like you see some guys with smallmouth. They're in the boat, in less than about 45 seconds, which is actually a lot healthier on the fish. If you guys didn't know that, but it is. Anyways, but that is super interesting. I also wonder how much that heavier, although it's thinner diameter, it's a little bit thicker than maybe you might think a 6 or maybe an 8-pound test would be. I wonder how that plays, maybe even slowing the bait down a little bit, because it's going to have a slightly a little bit more drag coming through the water. Maybe it makes the action. We learned with that Kenta, when we talked to Kenta Kimura, like he uses 20-pound line on a lot of things that we might think to not do that, but it's because he wants the weight of the fluorocarbon. And so it's kind of similar in this situation where it's, we're thinking, you might think finesse technique, 6-pound test, 8-pound test at heaviest, but again, he's using 14-pound. So it's really interesting.
And these have the finesse eyes. They've got, that's a stout hook.
I noticed that.
It's super sharp. It's not like a flipping hook, but this sucker is stout.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry about flexing it out for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, and there's a balance. You don't want to have your drag so cranked down that you're absolutely hammered. There's a balance to all of it, but I keep my drag fairly tight. There's a little drag strip on the hook set, but I don't keep it super loose by any means. And then, like you saw, I keep the fish moving. I'm not going to let the fish just run and strip and strip and strip. I'm just going to keep pressure. And if you trust your line that it's not going to break, you really don't need to let a fish run. So, there's a balance. But
use good equipment.
You just get good at landing fish when you've landed a ton of fish.
Yeah.
Yep. Use good equipment and practice a lot. And I don't practice with a net normally because I have to land them with my hands. And so I'm really coordinated, and my hand eye has always been good, so I can grab fish smoothly, and that's a big help too.
This video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app. This is an app that you can download on your phone that helps you to find bass on your local bodies of water a lot quicker. Once you download this app, you can actually select the lake that you are fishing, and then you can input data like water temperature, water clarity, whether you are fishing around vegetation or if you are fishing in a windy or protected area. Once you input all this information, the app will actually spit out lures, techniques, and areas that you can go on your local body of water to catch bass. This app is backed by hundreds of different tournament results from across the nation and can be extremely accurate. So if you guys would like to help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel and allow me to bring more videos like this to you, hit that link down below and download the Deep Dive app today.
Have you found that the fish hit this, they're coming from behind, hitting this bait? Is it more of a tick? Do they hit it aggressively? What kind of bite can you expect when you're fishing this technique?
The best ones are when they swim right through it. I love that when they come up under it and they just hit it and they just continue right through it. And it's very subtle though. Like I have taken a ton of guide clients and taught them how to do this, and that's helped me a lot. Like when you can teach somebody how to fish this bait on live scope and how to tease a bass up into biting and how to make it eat and how to hook it and feel the bite and all that stuff, that is when, if I can teach somebody to do it, I can surely do it myself, because teaching somebody how to do it's way harder than doing it yourself. And so I've had a lot of practice, and it's been a great opportunity to guide and teach people how to catch fish on the Ned Miki, but a lot of the time they don't feel the bite. And so I'll watch the fish on live scope swim through the bait, and I'm like, they got it, don't they? Like, surely they got it in their mouth. Like I just saw the fish swim right through where that thing was. And you can tell when a fish comes up on a bait, if they're staying at the same speed as the bait, they're not going to eat it. But when they are gaining ground quickly, it's about to happen. And so the bite a lot of the time is very soft. It's just a little tick, or they just swim right through it. Probably my coolest bite I've had on it all year was at Toledo Bend. I caught all but 2 of my fish at Toledo Bend on a Ned Miki. And that was Ned Mikiing offshore stumps where the fish were. You're good.
I was just gonna say, was that with the
What's that?
3.75 inch too at Toledo even?
It was. Yep. Yeah, I think for slow working the bait and for slow teasing it, the 3.75 inch is a different plastic. It's pure Elastec instead of a heavily salted scented jerk shads, which has the scent impregnated in it. Also, it's just a little bit different composition. It's a little softer. And so I think it gives it more of a quiver opportunity when you're shaking it because of the true, just regular, smaller piece of Elastec. It jiggles more. So I was throwing the 375 at Toledo, and I was teasing it over stumps where fish were spawning offshore. And I was also teasing it over like rock points and stuff. But I saw a big giant blob floating on a rock point. And it was a blob that, like, if it was at Logan Martin, this thing's swimming around these rocks in 5 feet. And if it was at Logan, I probably would have said, there's no way that's a bass. Yeah. And so I'm like, but I'm at Toledo. So any giant mark could be a bass. And I throw like 4 or 5 casts at it and it won't bite. And I'm teasing it so slow, like just making 15-foot pitches at this fish, just watching it swim along the rocks on live scope. And finally, I bring it right over his head, and I watch the fish just go, tick, and he ticked it. And it was the lightest little tick, and it's on my Joey Fishing social media pages, but it was a 674 on a Ned Miki. And just insane. The way it jumped and the way it fought, it was just nuts. Like one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Gosh, that is so awesome. That is so awesome. And again, you think of, we had Ben Milliken win that tournament throwing a glide bait, catching, well, he didn't actually throw the glide bait much. He caught a few fish on it, but you think that this is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, but it's just like a little French fry. The big ones still like it. Like he's still catching 6s on a regular basis, or at least in the lakes that they live in.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. It's true. It is a weird deal, but it works. And I love catching them a lot of different other ways too. But this is is something that if I can get this dialed in, I feel really confident doing it, and it works. And it has a shot to win any tournament. It really does. Yeah.
Now, one thing I did want to know is I know that I think you use primarily the 3/16. But do you ever vary that? I mean, I know since you're using the 3.75 too, but for example, when you were at, what's the place in South Carolina? I forget.
Norman.
Hartwell.
When you were at Hartwell, or Norman or whenever we were kind of using that little bit bigger one, did you use a heavier weight, or are you pretty much 3/16? That's the one you're comfortable with?
So if I'm using the bigger hook, I'll go to the 1/4 ounce. It's a little bit heavier and it's a little bit bigger. It's a little broader jig head with that 3/0 hook. They don't make a 1/4 in the 3/16 ounce, or they don't make a 1/4 ounce in the 1/0 hook. And now I would like to see if we could get something a little bit heavier made, because there are times where I've thrown a 1/2 ounce jig head if I'm fishing in 50 plus feet of water. And because it's hard when you're looking at swimming fish that are swimming 2 miles per hour and they're 50 or 60 feet down. Like the timing on that is insane. You got to throw like 60 feet past them. And that whole deal is fun when it happens, because to fire that far past a fish and watch it sink and watch them swim, when it finally intersects, it's really cool, but it's also a pain in the butt to do. So I've done it before, but I like to throw a big, heavy, different brand jig head if I'm fishing 50 feet or deeper. But 90% of the time I throw the 3/16 ounce, and that's really 30 feet or less. That's a perfect size. It doesn't take that long to get down there, especially if you're using that light braid. I'm sure the heavier fluorocarbon lets it sink a little quicker. And I've caught thousands of fish on a Ned Miki with 11-pound test Tora too, which is like 8 or 9 pound test diameter. That's the Tora fluorocarbon. I've thrown their 11 a lot for leader line too, but I started throwing the 14 just so I don't have to worry about breaking off a big one in a tournament. I don't think the fish care about seeing the line. They're coming up underneath the bait. They're not coming between, they're not coming and looking down on it like it would a drop shot and seeing the line connected to it. They're coming up under it, and they're eating it. So the line's not going to bother them with this design, with that system and everything.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about water clarity.
Okay, go ahead.
And see what the minimum water clarity is that you're looking for to start using this technique. And obviously, I wouldn't guess that there's a maximum clarity because it looks so darn natural.
Yeah.
So what would you say your minimum water clarity is?
The cool thing about the Ned Miki is I really do fish it in dirty water. I fish it in clear water. I've caught them on the Coosa River when it's flooded. And if you fish the Coosa, you know that it gets like chocolate milk muddy, like not orange mud like the Red River or something, but it gets super muddy where you can only see down 3 to 6 inches. And I'll catch them on it then. I mean, bass are insane predators. And the way I look at it is they can feed at night on stuff. They can eat tiny shad at night. Why would they not be able to eat my Ned Miki in the daytime in dirty water? So I've caught it, like I'll throw it on current seams and flush it in the current. Like I'll be fishing a big gravel bar and the current's ripping over it in 2 feet of water, and I'll throw it up there and I'll just tight line it and slowly wind it through the current and catch them. And I've been doing that for years. So it's limitless. All the options with it are really limitless. It's just all around from shallow to dirt, shallow to deep to dirty to clear. It just works.
Yeah. So when you're tickle winding it, you're kind of tickling their lateral line, letting them know, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, I'm here. Yep. Yeah, you're just trying to stay above them and keep it vibrating and keep them coming, and they'll jump out and get it.
So I noticed something that you said when you were talking about working it was that you really kind of wanted it to stay level, if not actually kind of go up, which I think is a little bit counterintuitive to what a lot of fishermen think. We're always taught, bass eat things on the fall, and so you think, and obviously you talked also about tight lining, and that's kind of more of a falling type presentation. But so that's you said it's a big key is kind of keeping that bait at kind of flat or coming up. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it is. And I really think some of that is crappie related. Like you can picture it in crappie fishing. With crappie fishing, they will hit it on the jig or on the drop, or when you're hopping a little crappie jig. But I love catching crappie, and the way I learned to catch crappie was just throwing it out there where you knew crappie were, and then just slowly winding it at a speed where the jig was not doing anything up or down. It was just coming in at a steady pace, and they like to feed upward. And it turns out that bass, I would say, probably 75% of the time, they're eating things upward. They will obviously, they're apex predators in a lot of situations, so they'll chase things down or up or over and around, but they love eating things upward, especially bait fish. I think that's just what they do. They're going to chase right through something or push up on it more than they're going to swim over the top and then push down onto something.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why that retrieve and I mean, any self-respected shad is going to run away when a bass chases after it too. So you can picture what is the most natural thing for that fish to see. And when you're winding it and it's chasing something, it doesn't turn and swim into their mouth or drop to the bottom. It normally, unless it's a crawdad, it's normally going to run from them. And that's where I think that's just what triggers the bite, is making it run from them or steadily just get away from them.
Yeah.
I've always thought that bass use the surface of the water almost as a ceiling of, once you can get that bait fish as close as possible to it, if you exit the water, you're not going to catch it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like pushing it up against a wall. And I think they do that too with when your boat's sitting there, as you're bringing the retrieve up, same thing. I think they see the boat and it surprises them, and they're, boom, eat it or turn away.
Eat it or turn away.
They turn away a lot more for me than probably Ty or Joey.
That's not true.
Yep. Sometimes it comes to that decision-making time where a bass has to choose. It's like, am I going to eat it or am I not? And I don't fish for a fish that already is attempted to eat my bait or aggressively followed my bait and turned off. I really am not going to try to make multiple casts at one that's already given it a shot and hasn't taken it. I'm just going to keep going to the next one. And I catch a lot of fish suspended on this bait in the wintertime where they're only 2 feet below the surface. And I didn't know bass did that in the winter until now. But a lot of bass where I live, they'll sit 2 to 5 feet below the surface, especially in the afternoons. And that's where the water's warmer and the bait fish still are. And they'll just cruise out there in wolf packs right below the surface. And so you're hitting them and you're just hitting them over their head, and then you're winding it immediately and teasing the fish up to bite it. So I do that a lot too. I mean, there's just, like I said, it's year round when it works, but there's a lot of just, you learn when you see fish chase it on live scope, and it's things we never would have seen without it. I wouldn't have known all these things of how the bass react and how they like it and all that stuff had it not been for forward facing sonar, but now I do. And so you got to take advantage of it.
Yeah. I think we were talking the other day about forward facing. I know I've got Live Scope, you've got Mega Live, and we were saying, we're using it to catch fish, but I don't think that's the most important thing. I think we're learning a whole heck of a lot more than we are using it to catch fish.
Yep.
We're looking at behavior, how they're setting up, how they're ambushing predators. We're able to tell fish species apart. And I think that whether you're for it or against forward-facing sonar, it's just an incredible learning tool, first and foremost. Use it to catch fish. It's super fun, but it's a learning tool. And once you really adopt it and start getting used to it and utilizing it in your repertoire, whether it's in a tournament or you're just fun fishing, you really learn to appreciate how important it is.
Yeah, you just learn how the fish swim. I mean, I can pull up on a point that someone's been fishing their whole life, and I can learn it in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. I can understand where every rock is and exactly how that point works and where the fish sit on it. And I can tell if they're there or not really quickly and whether I need to leave or not. It changes. It is a learning tool, and it's changed everything. And it's something where I've been saying this a lot lately. I want people to still know how to fish a bait. And especially if I'm teaching high school kids or my kids, Zeke or Eli or Noah in the next few years, I want them to be able to feel the bottom and detect a bite and know how to flip and know how to skip and do all those things too, and still be a very versatile angler. But I also want them to understand, how to watch them and how to learn and how to tease them into eating. So there's still a lot of different ways to fish that catch them. But live scope, I don't care if you're flipping down the bank, you're still going to see things and see a little stump out off the bank and catch a fish off that you never would have seen. Or just it helps you to learn every single day for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that it is so powerful. It's so there's people on one side of the fence or the other all the time, but it's one of the most powerful tools. And I know, this year I'd always fished with live scope out of your boat for a number of years, but this year I've, over the last year I've actually had live, Mega Live in my boat, and just the things that you learn so quickly about, like you said, the areas that people fish. Like there's areas that we fished on certain lakes that before we even had it, it's like we knew that this cast got the bite, and you could feel some subtleties, but you wouldn't know everything is there. You didn't know that there actually was one rock, there the size of a basketball or something that always held the fish. You're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And it's also something you just pull up to now. You make that cast right away, and you know that cast is hitting exactly where it needs to be. I think just lining up a cast is the biggest powerful or the biggest thing that live scope and Mega Live has really helped with.
Absolutely.
Yep, you become a shooter instead of a fisherman in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like
targets. Even you're really shooting targets.
Yeah, like laydowns. If we've got this cast versus, you say you're casting north versus casting south, you're like, man, I always get bit casting north, but I can never get bit casting south. You can tell that on live scope. Okay, maybe it's got a limb that's going this way that the fish is sitting under, and you're just not able to present it to that fish.
Yeah,
from the different angle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm excited.
I'm
I just
thinking
want to
about
go
the
fishing
one,
right
I'm
now.
thinking about the one stump that you always get hung up on when I'm casting at the one shell bed.
Yes. That's the one. It's got a lot of lures
that one stump.
on it.
Don't make this cast.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So
I'll see it when I'm flipping in the river too. Like probably my second favorite technique I've ever, that I do is flipping. And I love flipping a jig. I flip the Z-Man Cross Ice Power Finesse jig, and I live scope with it. I flip wood. I flip brush, I flip stumps, I flip docks with it, and it gets a lot of bites. But if I'm flipping in the river, I used to just see the treetop or the tip of the tree and the limbs hanging out. Now if I'm flipping in the river, I can see where the root ball is, and I can flush that jig right through the root ball, which is a completely different ball game, and that's where the most current's broken. So I mean, it's never ending. But I love flipping a jig, and again, I use live scope when I'm doing it. Not as much under docks. I do use it under docks, but it's changed everything. But you still have to be good at casting, and still have to be good at all the different techniques, and you still have to put the time in, probably even more time in to compete these days. You got to be on the water more than your competitors. You really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many days a year do you think you spend on the water between tournaments, practice, guiding?
That's a good question. I guide, probably the most I've ever guided in a year was about 200 days, maybe a little bit more. And that was several years ago. Now I guide 100 to 150 days a year. I'll be guiding plus, 100 days of tournament practice and tournaments a year, right around there. And then I fish a lot when I'm home. My kids love to fish, and that's a blessing to get to go with them. Me and my son Zeke are actually going tomorrow morning for a few hours before it's 95 degrees. But yeah, I love getting out there, and I get to fish a ton. So I don't know, probably close to 300 days a year I fish. It's hard to picture. I do take most Sundays off because my family and I go to church, and so I don't guide on Sundays. And if I have to fish, a tournament day, I try to get back as soon as I can to my home church, and that's just something that changed my life a lot when I made that a priority. It really did. Taking those Sundays off, it changed my life big time.
That's awesome. That's something that we kind of do as well. We're both men of faith over here, and there's always tournaments that pop up on Sundays, but we actually say no to more than we say yes, just because it's kind of the same thing for us.
Yep.
Making it a priority, I think that's really important, and I know that not only do you make it a priority, but I know that you also, if I believe correctly, pray for a lot of the open events that you are in, which is really cool.
Yeah, I do. I've been doing the invocations the last several years, the prayer, and then I share a little scripture and share a little message. And honestly, like even the tournament I won at Lake Eufaula, at the end of it, all those emotions from winning a tournament are incredible. But I was not there thinking about winning a tournament. I was there doing what God wanted me to do, and that was using the platform He put me on to glorify Him and to share the greatest news anyone could ever hear, which is not about how to fish the Ned Miki. That's that Jesus died for you. So that happened, and then I win the tournament. And then next thing I know, a young man that was in the top 10 came up to me, and he told me that he wasn't a Christian or he had never been to church, but what I said really touched him and brought him to tears when he listens to it. And I was like, man, that right there moves me a lot farther than catching a fish or winning a tournament. Like, that's why God put me there. Yeah. And I feel like that's 100% my true motive, is doing that. So it's amazing. When it changes your whole perspective. It makes the bad tournaments, it makes you understand that it's all God's plan, and it makes the good tournaments even more sweet because it's all Him just blessing you. So It changes everything when you understand and you got your faith.
Yeah. No, I think that's so awesome, man. And it's even better that you're so much more, you just talk about it so much. I think that's so great. Any podcast or video that I've listened to, you're always mentioning your faith, and it's hard for people to do that. But like you said, man, you understand the bad times. For me, I lost a 6-pound bass on Lake Champlain in the open that if I had caught it, it would have put me in the elites. And I think about that fish all the time, but I also know that, like, if I had caught that fish, I would have never started YouTube, and now here I am, and it's my full-time gig, and it's really awesome how God can work. So I think that's really awesome, man.
Yep. Think about it. You might not have a child that you have now. If things would have went different. I've missed the elites by an ounce before and by 10 ounces before. And I'm grateful for every time I miss the elites. I say thank you, Lord, because I know that He didn't want me to be there. Yeah. And if I'm meant to make the elites this year, you guys know I'm in 9th place in points. Yep. And I had a bad first day at the St. Lawrence River. I was really struggling. And I said, you know what? I'm grateful for this day, because if I'm not meant to make the elites, I got to have a bad day, right?
Yep.
And then the next day I go out and I'm comfortable and content, and I catch 21 pounds, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe you do want me to make it. So It's all good. It's all good either way. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and keep fishing and walk by faith and not by sight and see what happens.
Yep. Yeah. Being content in the bad times.
Yeah, that's right. And just knowing that you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself. You can fish a little freer, and just know that Jesus is going to guide you to this creek, not that one, because that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
So, super cool. Love it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, you did talk about flipping being flipping a jig being one of your favorite techniques. Is there any other techniques that you kind of consider yourself? This is something that I kind of struggled with as an open angler, and even being an Ohio fisherman, is that we're kind of born over here having to be like extremely versatile. There's more tournaments that we fish where we weigh in 5 fish on 5 different lures than 5 fish on the same lure. And so with that, it makes you versatile, but I also think that it doesn't always allow you to get like really just intricate with certain techniques that you can win on. So, do you ever run into that? I mean, I know you're a versatile angler, but do you ever run into almost spreading yourself too thin where you can do too much?
Yeah, I think that's really detrimental in tournaments, like you said, to have too many ideas in your head and to try to do too much in practice. Like there's ways that tournaments are getting won right now, and the Ned Miki is one of them, or any version of that. But this version, I believe, still is by far the best. And that works. I mean, it will absolutely it can win a tournament. And if you can add that with a couple different patterns that get you moving in the right direction in the morning, or whatever that may be, to catch you one extra fish, or here or there have a flipping deal, it's better a lot of the time to have less than to have more. And I've heard it for years, and I know a lot of guys have been successful by fishing their strengths. And I think this industry changes back and forth. For a while there, what was the number one strength? It was dominated by shallow cranking and throwing power baits, jerk baits, crankbaits, and a spinner bait by KVD. Now that has changed a little bit, and it's changed, and it's fallen kind of into my lap because I got really good at guiding using live scope and using the Ned Miki, and now finesse baits that you can tease a pressured fish into biting are dominating our sport. And so that's come kind of fallen in my lap. It's just a blessing that happened. But it's made my career flourish in this sport. So I love all the other stuff, but as far as tournament fishing goes, you want to have a handful of things that you're confident in, and you just go and make it work for you on that body of water. And that's the best advice I could ever give somebody, is to be very versatile and really understand all the different ways to catch them, and do your research and be a student of the game and know all the ways to catch them and practice them. But I mean, when it boils down to it, there's certain ways that are going to win tournaments, and there's certain things you can get so good at that you can win, even if it's not conventional to what people would expect.
Yeah, I think that's how you get so dialed in to one particular bait, Joey. Like, the exact way to rig it for this presentation, to do this, to do that, and if you're trying every technique out there during a tournament or just out fun fishing, you're never going to intimately know the bait that you're working. It's almost like an extension of your arm. Yeah. Your rod, your reel, that. Yep. The bait, the line. It's really, really interesting. But I think you have to be able to take that and apply it to, like you said, different techniques. Like, you can take this and tickle wind a deep fish.
Tickle?
Yeah. And then... or tickle wind, but then also, take it to Lake Hartwell and be able to use the same exact setup and just power fish it for herring fish, burning it. So it's super interesting, but I think that's how you get so good at something.
Yeah,
is when you can apply it across the board, especially across the country. I mean, this is a coast to coast, north to south bait.
It is. I'm excited for the Open in Florida on the Harris chain. I'm going to go tickle wind me up a 10.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Heck yeah. And I think Florida might be an untapped...
Don't tell anybody, though.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone. Florida might be that untapped fishery, though, when it comes to this kind of stuff. Guys are out there swimming worms and flipping, but that is something that's really, really cool. So one thing that I really wanted to ask you is I know in Eufaula, and first of all, you do a really good job on your videos, not only just showing fish catches, but explaining your thought process, which is really, really cool. And it's probably one of the biggest learning things that people don't understand, is just the thoughts, the decisions behind it. So awesome job on that. But the other thing that I noticed, especially in the Eufaula, is that you went out and practiced during the tournament. And that's something that is really hard as a tournament angler to do. I mean, if you fish the same local body of water every single day or every single weekend, it's a little bit easier because you might practice just areas where you've caught them in the past. But to do it in tournament on a lake that you've never seen, it's very difficult. And I'd like for you to just kind of talk about how, you go about that? And if that is this the first time you kind of done that, or have you been doing that a lot more in these tournaments, especially the ones recently where you've really been doing well?
I've been doing that for years, and I've found that practicing during the tournament is one of the most important things you can do if you have the opportunity. And normally that's when you've already caught a solid bag, and then you can just start going from there and start adjusting and trying new things. But like I've literally like a lot of tournaments that I've done good in on the final day and had a good day three, or when I had a good first day, I had a really good second day, and I know I'm probably going to make the cut, and so I spend time practicing and I'll just go run some new water or check a new area and try to add one little detail or one other brush pile or one little stretch of 3 or 4 brush piles. And that's when a lot of the time when you're doing that, I mean, when are your most successful days? During a full week of tournament practice and tournament days. So a lot of the time they're during the practice days.
Yep.
And so when you think about it like that, I mean, you just have to fish with a free mind. And there's a reason why some people are really good fishermen and it doesn't translate into being a really good tournament fisherman or really good results. And it's because you can get so cramped in your mind, you can get so stuck, and you can get just where you almost have like, it'd be like having writer's cramp for a writer where you just can't write anymore. And you can't think of what to do, even though you know what you're supposed to do. And that's a miserable feeling. And I've experienced that in tournaments where I've had the highs and the lows. And I've had those tournaments where I literally, there could have been a bass that was the hungriest bass in the world in front of me, and I couldn't have caught it because I was so uptight. And that's a terrible feeling. It really is awful when you get spun out like that. And it still happens to me. It happened in the first tournament of the year this year on Lake Eufaula. I got kind of spun out. And I tried running all over the place. It was on a lake I wasn't familiar with, other than my week of practice. And that's Eufaula, Alabama. And I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know if I should run down the lake or up the lake or go over or around. And I bombed on the first day, and that was my worst finish of the year. So it's the best if you can stay free and practice while you fish. It's a super valuable skill to get good at. And it takes a relaxed mental attitude.
Yeah. I know for me, fishing the opens, I always try to kind of look back at some of those bigger tournaments, especially the multi-day tournaments, and just is kind of look through them and see what I did right and what I did wrong. And there's almost always a correlation of that I got a good bag early and I kind of went out and fished some new stuff and practiced a little bit. And it's almost always the same, except for at Lake Chickamauga, where I just found a magic spot. But besides that, like the Oneidas at Norman, where I've done really well, like it's always, you're going out, you're looking in tournament for new areas. You might catch a big one doing that as well. You might not always find a new group of fish, but you might just catch one random big one that can also push your bag way up.
Yep, you got to fish free.
Interesting. Random question. Is guiding harder than tournament fishing?
I don't think it is. To some people, the pressure of guiding is more than the pressure of tournament fishing because you're linked to somebody else and you got to have them be successful or you feel like you failed. My guiding is more of teaching. I don't live on a lake where people are coming to try to catch their personal biggest largemouth, their PB fish or anything like that. I live on a system of lakes that have a lot of tournaments on them and are very diverse. We'll catch fish in 3 feet of water and in 25 feet of water every day, year round, pretty much. And people want to come and learn when they fish with me. So I don't think guiding's harder than tournaments. I guess it's, at least when I'm in a tournament, it's all me as far as like I can just go fish really hard. And so mentally, sometimes I do need, like, tournaments are almost like a break where I'm not teaching, I'm just fishing and I'm just doing my best to hammer them. Not always teaching, but I love to teach. And going back to my faith, I look at every single morning when I wake up and I go to the boat ramp. I don't know who I'm going to be meeting a lot of the time. I don't know their story or their background or their struggles. And so I look at it as an opportunity to encourage that person and to be a light to them while we're fishing. And so it's still my ministry and my platform. And I know that guiding is for a great reason. I've made bonds that have been part of changing people's lives. And so that's the other way. Again, it's like, it's all God's plan. And I'm just blessed to fish for a living. And that's part of how I fish for a living.
Yeah. It's a whole lot more than just catching a slimy green fish.
Or brown one.
Or brown.
Yeah, or spotted, whatever they are.
Yeah, or spotted. Well, man, that's super awesome. I've really loved sitting here talking to you and just learning That's what it's really all about. But something that I didn't know if you noticed, I kind of broke down some of your statistics. Since you have been fishing the opens for 14, this is your 14th year. A lot of those you fished one division. That's what I used to do too, because you're paying $10,000-$12,000 for one division. I think really in just the last year or two of when you fished more. More than just one division. Is that correct?
Yeah, that year I had the win at Pickwick and the win at, or the second at Norman. I only fished 6 tournaments that year.
Yeah.
And it just was a crazy year. It was like everything, I got paid in almost all of them and just had a crazy year, and then missed the Elite Series by an ounce. And that was just meant to be, like we said.
Yep.
But yeah, this is the most I've ever fished. This year last year I fished 8 tournaments. My wife was due to have our baby right around the Sam Rayburn, and she was having some health issues. So I skipped Sam Rayburn last year. It was the last tournament of the season. But this year will be my first year doing all 9.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. And it's been fun. And my family and I travel. We're a team, and we travel together. My wife homeschools the kids, and so we can do this full time. And like yesterday, we just got back from being gone for 6 weeks. I literally won the Oklahoma tournament. We drove to Wisconsin for 3.5 weeks of vacation. Drove to New York as a family for the Open for 8 or 9 days, and came back. So I've got an amazing wife and an amazing family with my 3 boys, with Zeke, Eli, and Noah, and we're just a family unit, and we go everywhere together. That's just what we do.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. And something that I've noticed just from your stats, so I kind of broke them down into 5-year sections, even though you're kind of not finished out your third 5-year section, whatever. Anyways, and from 2010 to 2014, your average finish was about 79th. And again, this is the opens. Back then, they probably didn't always draw as many, but you're still talking about around 200 boats. So even above the middle of the field, which I thought was good. And then you look at your average finish from 15 to 19 was 51st, so a dramatic increase there. And then here, even recently in the last 4 years, you've jumped up to even 44th place as an average finish, which a lot of guys may not always like see that and be like, oh, that's awesome, but that's really doing well. Like averaging a 44th place finish over the course of that many years in the opens is actually doing a lot. Like you're catching them consistently. Yeah, you might have an 80th place finish, but you're filling them in with a lot of 20s, 30s, and you have several top 10s. I mean, you have 10 top 10s. I think that that's really awesome. And like we said, man, or like you said, you're in 9th place in the AOI. Like as of right now, you have qualified for the elites. You have, I think, 3 more tournaments. Is that right? 3 more tournaments to go. And we're gonna be praying for you, man, and believing that if it's meant to be and God's hand is on it, man, you're gonna be there next year. So that's really awesome. You can see how you've progressed just through those statistics, and I'm excited for it, man. I'm excited to see you just flourish on the elites.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that so much, and the prayers mean a lot. And if I'm meant to be there, I will. And I know that it's exciting to see. It's exciting to live like that, to live by faith and just know that whatever's meant to happen will happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. Come Grand Lake next year, we're going to see you tickle winding.
That might be legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. Bringing the tickle wind to the.
You never know, man.
to the big stage.
I didn't think about that. Yeah. That's going to be, big stage. I mean, you got Gustafson's win was not, it was similar, but that would be, that would be awesome.
That'd be super cool.
Cool.
Have you worked with Z-Man?
I can see it happening. You never know.
Yeah. I know we're trying to wrap it up, but selfishly.
Keep going.
Have you worked with Z-Man on product development for either for this system or a system in the future?
I really, as far as developing it, I got to use the prototype and I got to see it when they first had the idea to make that jig head, and I was really excited about it. And so, I mean, they may or may not have followed through with creating that jig head without me. They probably would have still done it, but it's been a mutual growth, and I've been able to be a part of Z-Man's progress, and they've been a huge part of my progress in supporting me. And so they're an amazing company. And I got to help them design the goat series of baits, the goat toads and all that stuff came from that. So I got to help with that design process and go through the prototypes with them and use them and try to adjust things and figure out how to make it work better. And it's fun when you get to do that kind of stuff. So I don't know if we'll have the Nania Miki could be the next thing where you sell it all as a package, but yeah, the Nania Miki. But
Yeah.
it's fun, and I've got so many great sponsors. Six Sense is my hard bait sponsor, and Waterland sunglasses, and Six Sense clothing, and then Z-Man on my chatterbaits and jigs and soft baits. And I was actually skeptical of Elastic when I first started meeting the Z-Man guys a long time ago. But just like everyone else, once they try it, they fall in love with it. And
Mhm.
so then Z-Man's added all these different models of baits. And then once you trust it, it's like, okay, there's every single boat in professional fishing has elastic in it.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that I'd say 99% of them have something Z-Man in their boat. And there's a reason for that. It's got qualities that make it really, really good. And I've just got a lot of amazing companies that have been natural progression of my career and making friends everywhere I go. And it's a blessing to work with awesome people. And you guys can see those on my website. That's joeyfishing.com, all my sponsors, and then through my social media and all that stuff. It's just Joey Fishing on Instagram and Facebook, and then Joey Fishing on YouTube. And I appreciate the support and the love that I get from the people that are following me and friends and fans, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I will be sure to link all that down below in the description. So if you guys want to follow Joey, you want to go fishing with him, maybe you live where he's guiding. What lakes do you guide on in Alabama there?
I got on the whole Coosa River system, so that's Weiss, Neely Henry, Logan Martin, Lay, Mitchell, and Jordan, and then also at Lake Martin and Smith Lake. And so those are the lakes that I guide on around here. They're all within an hour and a half of my house. I live on Logan Martin, so that's the one I fish the most. But it's a perfect place to learn how to catch bass. The Alabama is just awesome for learning how to catch them in a bunch of different ways.
The Ned Miki is definitely a sneaky technique that is here to stay. And another couple of really sneaky techniques we actually talked about with professional angler Kenta Kimura in this podcast right here. So if you guys enjoyed this one, I really think you'll enjoy this one with Kenta. Don't forget to subscribe, comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.